recording again. So I don't know whether you use Skype or not, but once you pop off the call, do not click the cross button. Just click and not now. But after we finish the podcast, click the red button down the bottom and we can both download the podcast.
Okay, perfect.
That's why I love Skype, because I don't need to send anything to anyone. Both of us can download it.
Great. Thank you.
But yeah, and something that came to mind now that I've been sitting on my ass for literally 2 weeks and I'm just like, but it's the whole idea of this is a journey, this is a roadmap, this isn't something that you just do and then it's done. And people are always expecting, like people are always in a rush, like we need to get here, we need to get here, we need to get here, we need to get here. And then as soon as I get a slight setback, it's like the wheels fall off the wagon and they feel like a failure. They feel like they can never get anywhere. They feel like it's the end of the world. And it's really common for people to have this time warp perception of this is feeling like it's forever. This is going to last forever. One day feels like it's a month. So maybe that's a really good place that we can start this conversation off, because it's not just with training, it's with nutrition, it's with everything. It's what is the rush? Where is the end that we're meant to get to? Because the end is technically the grave.
It's funny, I've been thinking about this exact thing for like a good amount of months now. For my own personal self, as well as my athletes. And one of the things that I started realizing was, I still hadn't killed off, and I'm maybe haven't even 100% yet, some of those inklings inside myself. Right? So whether that's me, for instance, I started my first dieting phase in like 3 years, maybe 4 months ago or something like that. And I noticed myself once I started that dieting phase, my expectations were really mismatched, because it was kind of like, oh, well, now I decided I'm going to be leaner, et cetera, so it's just going to happen now, which is like partially true. However, I started realizing that this thing is like forever. Like I should want to look and feel my best, and that might change as I age. So the training might change to a degree, or the type of nutrition might change, or, but you should want to look after your brain, mind, and body, like you said, basically until the grave. So I've been kind of challenging my athletes back with that. Like, where are you going to go? So like, I understand, and I'm a realistic person. So it's like, well, maybe you can't afford a coach forever. So that's fair, because you're kind of asking like, how long is it going to take until I'm ready to run on my own? Well, that's a little different for everyone. I've had clients who go all in and really just like are super coachable, and they listen and they do what they need to do. 6 months, you can be really rolling. I would say most people are 18 to 36 months of hard work and falling down on their face, getting up, preferably if you have some guidance to help keep you back on that path. And the one thing I learned is people need to learn how to expand their time horizons out. And I actually learned this from entrepreneurship. I'm pretty lucky that, I have a few businesses and things are starting to go okay. And I've found myself some minor successes. When I'm around people who are way more successful than me, one of the things I've noticed about them is they're thinking like 5, 8, 10 years in the future. And they're okay to spend some money today, lose some money today, not make some money today, because they'll make more in the future. And I notice myself having a hard time doing that, where I have a hard time saying no still to money and opportunity, because I'm still in like that half scarcity mindset where I don't have that full self-confidence and belief. So I think that's where that stems from, is because when people have tried something and it hasn't gone well the way they want in the past, you're left with a little piece of trauma. So you want to rush through all that to just get to the gold in some sense.
Yeah, and I know, because I know you, I know it's because of your history that has you still in that scarcity mindset, because the way that you were brought up, like your whole history in itself has led to you still clinging on to the same thought patterns that you had back then, which is really hard to shake when that's been your identity for so long, when that's been your reality for so long. And this is the same with people with dieting. this is why I hate a lot of the industry, and I know that you do as well. It's because the trainers and the coaches out there, the people that step on stage and then call themselves a coach afterwards, the way that they treat clients, it's setting them up to fail. And because they feel like that's the way that it should be done, with all these failures over and over again, they start to create the narrative, I can't do this, I'm a failure, this isn't meant for me. So then what happens is any other approach they take thereafter, they don't give their full ass effort because they already have it somewhere in the mind that they're going to slip up, they're going to fail, the other shoe's going to drop. What's the whole point of allowing myself to feel the success when I know that it's not going to last? And there was something else that you said in that, I had this written down before our call, which is funny, but people are too focused on the short term that they take approaches and they do things that sabotage their long term, which I think is a really powerful statement, because there's shit that I've done that I'm now regretting more than anything. And in the moment, I remember having the conversations with myself of, who cares? Like, it doesn't really matter about blah, blah, blah. That's not going to happen to me. Or I don't want this anyway. That's not that important to me. Like, it might be important to someone else. But there was someone that put up a tweet a while ago that I thought was powerful, and it got reshared a lot. It's almost like when we start off with just aesthetics in mind, with just strength in mind, with just this invincible mindset. But we get to a point where we then start to care about our health. We then start to care about aging properly. But that's not everybody. There are still people that are so hyper-focused on becoming their smallest self that they continue to self-sabotage. And like, even right now, especially realizing how much muscle I've lost the last few years because of all the setbacks that I've had. And then we know the pandemic, it's like muscle gets harder and harder to build the older you get. It's not impossible because you can do it, but everything gets harder the older you get. And I didn't have a lot of responsibilities before, yet I sabotaged it because all I ever wanted to do was stay my leanest self, chase this number on the scale. And I want you to talk on this one too, because the scale is something that you highlighted from our last podcast we did together, which I highly recommend you guys go and listen to. It's very recent from this year because I reposted it. It was one of the top ones that people enjoyed because of the philosophy we spoke about. So go and find that in January. But the scale is the worst metric of progress long term, because for example, I'm the same scale weight that I was in high school, which is funny because in high school I had a lot more body fat. I was bigger, and I am not super lean right now, but I have a shit ton of muscle mass. And I'm also the same weight that I was when I did my first building phase. And in my first building phase, I had a lot more body fat on me and not a lot of muscle. And this is the funny part, because when I did my first prep, I thought I was going to have a shitload of muscle because I was chubby, I was chunky, I was thick, I was built. But I was left with like a skeleton, because even though I felt like I built a lot of muscle, that wasn't muscle, that was glycogen, that was water weight. And this is where people feel like they get bulky. But I always say muscle is actually heavier than fat, because muscle, like the muscle in itself, isn't just muscle. There's water in it, there's glycogen in it. The muscle fibers, a kilo of muscle fibers equals a kilo of fat. But a muscle has more than just muscle fibers in it. So I'll let you take that one away.
Yeah, so the scale is one of these interesting fickle things, right? Because I think we all have our attachments to it that we have to overcome. You know, for me, I can speak just on my personal journey, how much things change. And I'll share my own personal details because I think it's important. So, I started natural bodybuilding, got my natural pro card. And natural bodybuilding, much like you said, is essentially becoming a smaller version of yourself, right? And I did the same thing as you, where I lost a bunch of weight and I thought, wow, when I lose this amount of weight, I'm going to be jacked and I'm going to have this look. And my first show, I'd lost 150 pounds, been in the best shape of my entire life, like by far. And I was still the worst, like, competitor subjectively, right? So I was so scared to let that scale weight go up after my show, because you just hear about people, talking about post show and all this stuff. And I definitely had some eating behavior problems, let's say, already from a lifetime of obesity. So I, for years, just stayed way too lean, and kind of followed down your trap. And then even later, when I started to try and build muscle, especially when I entered down the PED path, as I started coaching more enhanced athletes and wanted personal experience myself, that changes the game. And it showed me how fucked my mindset was here on the scale, because all of a sudden now I'm eating more than ever and utilizing some PEDs, and my scale weight just shooting up. But I've known by this time, this is 8 years into my fitness journey, I have a coaching eye now that I can't argue with. So I'm like, fuck, I'm 10 pounds heavier in 3 months, but I look leaner. And that was so hard for me to battle with, like, every day, because you're expecting I'm supposed to be getting lighter or leaner and the scale should be going down. So it's almost like the indicator on the map isn't showing you what you want, and it causes a lot of negative emotion. How many clients, Ruby, have you had, specifically females, where this is their morning? Check-in morning rolls around, they get up, they use the washroom, have a glass of water, maybe check some biofeedback if someone hasn't doing that, and they're already thinking, fuck, I gotta go weigh myself right away. And their whole day, for sure, if not the entire week's check-in, is predicated on if that thing says a lower number on that little digital box or needle, depending on what kind of scale it is.
Sad A.
And it's way, and also to that, let's say that it's not, which oftentimes it's not, because even if you've made progress and followed your plan, it doesn't necessarily mean your body's some spreadsheet that it's just going to exactly be the weight you want it when you want it, like some small child would want to dictate their life. Your body is a very complex piece of machinery, and has water and glycogen, as you mentioned, and sodium levels, sleep, stress, those things all play a factor on the actual physiological body weight. So when you get into this situation, female steps on the scale, let's say she's 0.6 pounds up. Maybe she's even headed into the week of premenstrual symptoms, so she's holding on to a little bit of water. She's already feeling like digestion's starting to slow because of that. The first thing her eyes look at in the mirror when she takes her check-in photos are all the shit she hates in her body. So the only thing she sees, and I'm just making this up, but maybe it's her low back and her back of her arms, or maybe it's midsection and chin, or everyone has their different pinpoints that trigger them. So now the only thing that they're going into the start of the week with is a negative connotation on their weight, and then what they hate about their body. Well, I could tell you right now, if you want to set your week up for a bunch of negative emotion, or your day at the very best, that's exactly how you would do it. So I think that getting over this scale focus is pretty important. I don't think there's one surefire way to do that. I think there's a lot of ways that people can come to that kind of that journey's end. And sometimes it's not using the scale. Sometimes it's reducing the amount of frequency that you do it. I think a lot of people if you're weighing yourself every single day, I think sometimes not weighing yourself at all becomes too neuroticism producing. So weighing yourself maybe once or twice a week to start, right? And then you can kind of scale that back. And if you have a coach, don't be scared to ask them. I tell my clients all the time, if you don't want to use a scale, I don't care, don't use it. I've built a coaching eye so that I don't give a shit. I don't need to scale to see anyway.
That is actually really important. I want to highlight that part. Like, when you have been doing this for long enough, I had someone say to me, it's ridiculous because I train people in person, yet I still struggle to teach them the things that you teach us online and that you pick up online. I still struggle to do that in person. And that's because you need much more of a coaching eye when you do things online, because you can't see things that you can see in person. So that's right. Have to develop that coaching eye. And because like Dyllon does bodybuilding preps as well. I started off as a comp prep coach. I did 2.5 years of comp prep coaching. So I developed the coaching eye for physique as well as the powerlifting coaching that I did. Like, I developed this eye that has allowed us to not have to use the scale for things. And it's also why I'm going to say this in the next part so you can finish what you're saying. But this is why it is so important for you to put a lot more than just, oh, I lifted this many pounds or this many kilos, this many reps. That's it. That's my training log. Like, we need a lot more than quantitative feedback.
I
Continue.
completely agree. I think that as I get older, I'm starting to find some of the enjoyment in my training by moving away from that, what you just described.
That
Um,
that was the movement I made 2 years ago, and that movement changed my whole life because I used to berate myself based on my performance in the gym, on numbers, on reps, on
you're doing the same thing as the scale. You're just doing it with the logbook, right? So it's like you're attaching your value to the achievement, right? And I know that, so that's actually funny because that stems from a lack internally of like self value, right? So if we're not valuing ourselves on like a deep personal level, and sure, you can have shortcomings that you want to fix. It doesn't mean we always have to think everything's perfect about ourselves. In fact, I think that that's probably not a good trait. But I think that, when you're willing to accept, like, sure, I have some shortcomings, I need to work on this, but I can use myself as my own personal example, right? Because I've had a lot of people ask me or tell me, like, oh, wow, it's so inspiring. You just work so hard. I wish I could be more like you. And then I always have to bring it back and say, like, be careful what you wish for, because a lot of the reason I work so hard, as I've been on my healing journey, I've discovered, is because I seek love through achievement, right? So that can become a very lonely and painful existence when you're just perpetually doing that, right? And if you've never been able to trust yourself, and because we haven't developed sort of the responsibilities, that's where it gets really easy to pick on those day-to-day things like the scale weight. And I also think most people that are struggling with those things, the scale weight, part of the reason they're also struggling, and I'm not saying everybody, but I'm averaging this. If I took an average of the athletes who struggle with that, it's because they're actually probably not doing their protocols maybe 80-85%.
I don't
And
believe I can.
so there's a self-sabotage loop keeping them from doing it, but then they live the shame, blame, and regret cycle when they step on the scale, because they're hoping that it's down despite the fact that they haven't done everything they should do. And that's where the pain comes in, because you're actually getting the prize to the game that you conducted, right? It's sort of like cheating at a game, and then at the end of the game you think you're getting a medal, or you're hoping you get a medal, and then they're like, actually, we have game tape of you kicking your golf ball out, out of the sand trap, and so like you're actually disqualified, and that's the pain, right? It's like, shit, I didn't do what I was supposed to do, I missed the mark, right? To sin is derived from a Greek word that's like exactly that, to have missed the mark or missed the target. So I didn't hit the target, and now I have to take those consequences on. And a lot of people aren't built to handle consequence, especially on a personal responsibility end, because we have very little practice. And then that becomes painful to the psyche that is having low amounts of self-belief, and it's painful to the part of the psyche that actually wants to strive for more, because you're kind of in this phantom zone where you're not healing the past and you're not moving into a new future, and you just have a bunch of self-perceived effort that's really high. And then the story you tell yourself because of that becomes fragmented, let's say.
I would say that's actually quite a lot of people, because there's also the whole concept of, yeah, I'm training really hard, but with a lot of females, what they perceive as hard is a lot of mental and physical exertion, even in terms of like high intensity cardio, doing all the cardio, exhausting themselves. Like, that's their perception of training hard, and they can do that for days and days on end and be like, I'm training my ass off, I'm not seeing results. And then it's like, if you actually want to see results for the effort you say you're putting in, then we need to change your perception of what intensity really is. But I want to go back to what you were saying about the whole, like, if you give your best and you show up every single day, you won't have a single doubt that the outcome will start to manifest itself, because you are putting in the work to do that. And it gets really easy to play that blame and shame game, especially if you haven't healed your past. But yeah, that's the thing with the scale. I want to ask you that question as well before I say my next part. You weren't so hyper fixated on being scared to let the scale go up until you did the bodybuilding prep, right?
Yeah, it's difficult. So I think that you have to, so like when an alcoholic decides to quit drinking, right? They actually have to stop drinking, because we always hear the kind of like in the movies, the joke is like, oh, I'm just drinking beer now. It's like light stuff. Well, that's sort of what we want to do in our fitness, right? It's like, oh, well, I have a really hard time with these type of snacks, or, you know, I have these little binge eating episodes, or I'll just eat a bag of candy, or I'll do this. Well, to stop doing that, you actually have to stop. And there's no right or wrong way to doing that. Some people go to a very intensive rehab where they get locked up for a while with no phone. Some people go to, you know, I'm using an alcoholics analogy, but some people just need a support system. Some people just need to remove themselves from the poor crowds that they're in. So if you have to throw out the stuff in your house, if you have to not buy it, you might have to ask your family for support. Usually these things are happening because someone needs something and they have something to say to themselves or to people in their support circle, and they're not doing that.
That I think this is where social media and people's opinions and all that kind of, like, the noise online can make this really difficult, because it can be seen as, oh my God, that's so restrictive of you. Oh my God, you're taking it too far. That's obsessive. That, like, it's almost like when people say you shouldn't restrict, or, well, you shouldn't keep out your trigger food or whatever it is, you need to bring it in. Well, no, you should not. Because if you're having trouble with it, the fact that you keep trying to bring it in and factor it in, and you keep repeating the same cycle, the same reason, that, like, it's the dumbest thing to do. You need to detox your taste buds, so to speak. You need to develop confidence in yourself that you can do it, and start to realize how good it feels, and teach yourself that you don't need that dependence on that very thing. It does not mean forever. It just means for now. And you might find out very soon that you don't need this thing anymore. You don't want it anymore. It was just a habit. It was just a comfort. It was just something that was quelling an absence, that you now have found something else to fill that isn't as detrimental to your confidence, to your mental health, to your physical health. Just like that, everyone has a different thing they need to do. And if it means cutting it out for a while, that is not a bad thing. Just because body positive Gen 010 on Instagram says, oh, you need to have body love, you need to be non-diet, anti-diet. Well, that's just a complete rebellion against freaking, like, the two different things. I know you want to say something, so I'll let you say it.
Yeah, it's, well, because you made a couple good points. Like, one of them being, you know, and I can admit that, you know, I've been doing this long enough where I let some of that noise wear off on me, you know, and I never really coached like that, but I kind of allowed that, you know, like, idea that you should, you know, if you're having trouble with stuff, you should just have a little bit of it and learn how to control yourself. And it sounds really good on Instagram in a 30-second clip. And I actually think that there's a little bit of truth to that. But I think that the truth you just said is in the right order before that other thing happens. Because for me, right, as someone who's, you know, I'd like to think I have a little bit of intellect, and I like to think that I can form thoughts well enough and be responsible. It's funny because I can look back now at my eating history, and only in the last year, 1 year out of 10, can I do what you just described. Where, like, I could have a half a cookie and just eat. I'm good. Like, I don't binge eat anymore. Right. It took 8 fucking years but it makes sense because I was obese for 20. So it took just about half the time added on top of that to get and that's with effort. That isn't just stumbling into some desert where now I'm here. Time just passed. That's me trying a million different things, being self-aware, understanding, fuck, I need to let go of this thing that's biting me because I don't want this thing to have a hold on me. I don't want to go to social events till I'm 50 years old and have these weird, stupid thoughts in my head so that I can't be antisocial because there's food here, all that type of stuff. So I think that it's pretty crazy that we sort of perpetuate people intaking or using the tools that are hurting them. It doesn't mean, again, you made a very good point. It doesn't even have to be that long. But what people end up finding out is when they remove it, they find out one of two things, sometimes both. One, you already brought this up, they realize that, fuck, that thing doesn't actually really I don't need that much. Like, it just was something that I got built into my habit and my brain's kind of rhythm. The second thing that they realize, and I ask this of client athletes all the time, people attack the food, right? So I'm sure you've seen this. You get a new intake, it's usually female in this case, and they want some help, and they'll say like, geez, I binge eat, or I do this. I don't know what's wrong with me. For 4 years, I eat too much sometimes, or on the snacks, I can't help it. And then I've tried keto, I've tried doing all these different things, and nothing's ever worked. And I'll tell them, hey, listen, you're attacking the food as the direct source of the problem, when the problem lies in you. And oftentimes I just have to ask a simple question. When you're going through one of these eating episodes, or even in your mind where you're just thinking about it, you're not even doing it, is there a possibility that there's a dopamine seeking behavior being formed because you have a lack in one of the 5 pillars of Maslow's hierarchy of needs in your life? So like, how's the relationships in your life? How's your close circle of people? Do you have a few really good friends who actually want the best for you, and some family? Do you have a career that's meaningful to you? Are you proud of your mind and body and your educational goals? Do you have any? How's your shelter and security and resources? And then how's your spiritual health? Are you going to some form of religious practice, meditation? There's not one kind, there's many ways to do that. And then you start finding out, most people have 0 or 1 of those 5 things. And it's like, well, that's why you're chasing the dopamine from the food. Your body and your brain is working perfectly fine. It's actually letting you know that there's a massive fucking problem that has nothing to do with food. It's that you need to start working on these things on the internal and the puzzles of your life. And as a byproduct, I bet you those will sort themselves out. That food will sort itself out way faster.
And it can get worse the further you get into a journey, because you can start off with all these good intentions with a little bit of balance, but then you get hyper obsessed with the dopamine hit of seeing results, and then you try to get faster and faster results until health and fitness become the thing of your life, and then everything else starts to fade away, and you don't even realize everything else is starting to fade away. So then you get further down this Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole of just chasing, that now you feel more lost than ever, because you let everything else slide away. You let the things that you started for, the things that matter most to you, slide away. And you made up a really good point there, in that you tried keto before, you tried all these different approaches before, and because the approaches that you took before left you feeling left out, sad, isolated, restricted, deprived, whatever it is, now there's this inbuilt, maybe it's subconscious, you're not conscious of it, rebellion against restriction. So you find it really hard to cut out or to abstain from the things that are actually sabotaging you right now, when something that's it becomes this thing that you've built this internal rebellion against the very things that can actually set you free, which is a form of restriction that is different from the restriction that you were used to, because now it's actually setting you free, but your brain can't delineate both of those. And this is why I say, actually detox your tongue, because if you listen to my last podcast with Jordan Syed, what he said about the pornography kind of thing, what he said was, if all you do is watch porn, then your realistic relationship is going to fade in comparison to that. Like, nothing will feel as good as the porn that you've experienced. And that's the same with the food. If all you do is bombard your taste buds with Macca's, with McDonald's, sorry, people who don't Australianize everything.
That's funny.
McDonald's, Hortons, what else is there? Like, all these different things that you just shove into your mouth. Everything else is going to taste bland. Of course, you don't like freaking vegetables. Of course, you need to butter everything up, coconut oil everything up, because you don't even know what normal food is anymore. So allow yourself to experience that. Give yourself the detox. Just go through the hard shit for a few weeks and you will surprise yourself. And you just need to see restriction in a different light.
Yeah. It's funny because, these ideas started to become more popular, around, just body positivity and all this stuff. And I think that it's just that the messages get hijacked. I think some of the messages are totally fine. I think that they get hijacked to play on people's, particularly females, trait compassion. to be falsely accepted for not having done any work, let's say. But that's a totally different conversation. But I think, I started challenging these ideas in some of my head, and then I went, well, I wonder if there's any counter evidence to this that isn't just from this timeline. So I started doing a little bit of digging. So I like history and philosophy. Like the Spartans ate one meal a day, and they had a rule where they would eat bland food. The Athenians did the same thing, except for when it was like spoils of battle. So they would feast for sure, and they would enjoy food and celebrate with the best wine and, the best animals. But in their day-to-day training and just personal responsibility and growing, it was all about the nutritional development, making sure you had enough food to handle the tasks you could, and keeping things a little bit more bland so that when you would eat something of value, or of richness, it would sort of give you what you're looking for, because otherwise it fades so quickly. Like McDonald's, and that's maybe a good example, but like McDonald's isn't going to give you the best dopamine rush it could if you eat it 2 or 3 times a week.
Oh, I did a really good reel on this literally last year, just because it was to do with makeup. So I think the females can resonate with this. I never, ever in my, I never used to wear makeup. Now I wear a little bit to the gym because I changed gyms, and I'm like, I want to dress up for it. But because I was so used to seeing my face without makeup on, it was such a big deal that I was wearing makeup that day. Like everyone noticed, not just me. And I really noticed. And the thing is, people get so used to seeing you in makeup every single day, all the time. It doesn't become that big of a deal when you have maybe extra eyelashes on for a special event. Yeah. Like it's that kind of same thing. And just touching on that thing as well, I could get a plain, I'm not going to say boiled, a plain grilled chicken with steamed veggies, which this is the last time I had an order, and oh my God, it was the best meal I ever had. Just a plain chicken with steamed veggies. And I'm like, the steamed veggies taste like they've been drowning in butter, because I'm so used to eating my meals the way that I do that I could taste the butter dripping off the veggies. But it was so tasty compared to what I'm so used to. And that chicken was so tasty, like even a plain old chicken, because it was cooked the way the restaurant cooks it. Because
a little bit of oil probably, and a little different. Yeah, that makes sense.
But it's like, it's such a plain meal that I found so much joy in, because I don't bombard my taste buds with exuberant things all the time. Continue.
I think that we also have removed the experience from some of these food related situations, right? Where like way more people now will like fucking eat a pack of cookies in the middle of the right before bed, like on a Tuesday by themselves. I think that, if you're gonna indulge, and I'm not one of these people that's gonna say that no one's gonna indulge in some food here and there. Make it count, make it for something, make it so that you're, with people that you like and want the best for you, and making sure that it's kind of an experience, not just some cheap fleeting thing where now you wake up and again fall back into that same kind of blame, regret type cycle that just doesn't do anyone any good. Just doesn't.
Yeah, and I want to go back to the scale, because if all you're chasing is the scale, you're actually more predisposed to falling into these negative patterns and never escaping them, because all you put your value on is the outcome. You're not actually valuing the process of becoming the person and trying to unlearn these behaviors for something that actually gives you some sort of purpose, some sort of meaning, some sort of, oh my God, I'm doing this for me, I'm building my confidence. And if all you're doing is trying to see that scale go down, trying to see some numbers move, and that's the thing, like I have an obsessive personality, a very obsessive personality that translated from the scales into the gym. And because my person, like I had an eating disorder for years. I'm someone that get very addicted to things. The fact that I broke through this, I'm not going to compare myself to anyone else, but there is some proof that if you are struggling, you can get through it too, but you need to be fucking patient, because my eating disorder started in 2008. And it took me until 2014 to fully break free from it. And now that I am here, I still had to work through those years, because then I went into bodybuilding. Then I translated that obsessiveness in bodybuilding to freaking powerlifting. And it took me ages to work through, but you need to be willing to work through that and stay through that and get someone to help you through that, because it is possible, but it's not going to be possible if you're trying to get everything done yesterday. Because it wasn't until I stopped rushing and realized that there is so much more that I want to enjoy in my life and actually start to live by my values that this happens. And I'm going to bring this to what you just said about the body positive thing before I go into the scales. I had a client that never changed because she was following a lot of those body acceptance, body positive, anti-diet things. But she kept telling me she wanted to change. She wanted to lose weight because she was really overweight. But her whole Instagram feed, her whole Explore feed was body positive, these messages, diet. So there was a lot of misery, a lot of putting herself down, a lot of I'm hopeless, blah, blah, blah. Why can I never change? Because of ambivalence that she was living with.
Yeah, I think that so when coaches can perpetuate this, you have to be careful, right? Because if an athlete already has low self-value and they've already maybe had a couple times where they've missed the mark, and those people get with a coach who's like, I'm just making this up, but you're always cheating on your diet. What the hell's wrong with you? How come you can't get this shit together? Like, it's not that difficult. Just stop eating bullshit. And I know they're coming from a good place, like the athlete background, and some people respond okay to that, but most people in the general population are going to hear that and hear something like, you've always been useless and you have no bearing of change forever, so the way you feel about yourself is exactly correct. And that's, if you want to give someone a route to no positive emotion at all, that's exactly how you do it. And that happens a lot in our industry, a lot more than I would hope it does. But that's why hopefully with some of these open conversations about some of these things that people do struggle with, that are because on paper it is really simple. This should be really simple. We're almost creatures of too much choice, right? We actually don't really do that well with too much choice, and that's kind of what we have in our nutritional realm right now. Like, realistically, I'll be honest, and I'm not saying this is even sustainable because I think everyone would starve, but if there was only like, I'm sure you've heard this before, but if only the outside walls of the grocery store existed, just your produce, your meats, your dairies and eggs and yogurts and things like that, probably the obesity would not be too high. And even where you are versus the US or Canada, like the continent, Australia is a much less obese population. And I've actually never been there, but my wife has, and she said that the food is a lot different. It's a lot better. There's not as much garbage, and there's other places that are even better than that. So it is tough because we're up against massive selection. So you have to be kind of aware that these food companies are not really there to help you, with your healthiest life. They're there to turn a profit, and having something very easily accessible that has a good shelf life, that's cheap, and that will get you to continue eating it because it tastes very good and it provides an instant dopamine hit from cheap sugars and different additive ingredients. They're winning and you're not, right? So it's just like, at some point we have to look at that and say, like, what selections can I make that are going to be more beneficial to what I actually want to happen here?
Yeah, and I have a lot of clients from America that send me menus from restaurants and cafes and shit. I'm like, holy shit, these restaurants are terrible. Like, I have never felt so blessed to at least have really good options where we are, but there are some places that I get that there is literally nothing I can select, like not even a freaking salad, because there are 2 salads on the menu. They are doused in freaking jam, this dressing, that, add in some feta, some seeds, there's nothing wrong with those seeds, nuts, feta, but then there's like jam, there's dressing, there's all these different things that just add so many calories to a freaking plain salad. And I saw a reel that someone popular put up about making choices in one of the restaurants, and if you looked up the nutritional menu of one of the salads was more than one of the burgers because of everything that was in it. And then they also showed steamed vegetables being 700 calories because I was like, how is it 700 calories? But there was like some potato in it, there was butter in it, there was like the fat content of the veggies. Like, veggies don't have fat. How much are they putting in this shit? Like, you can't escape that, which is why you need to be very freaking, like, you need to be aware of this stuff in order to move forward. But,
yeah, of course. This awareness is key.
and this is going back, oh yeah, to the coaches thing, because I wrote this note. There are a lot of coaches who, in their check-ins only, they get, were you 100% compliant with your macros? Yes, no.
Yeah.
What is your scale weight? Cool, these are your macros. Everything is just based on scale weight, maybe photos, and compliant. There is nothing else there, which just feeds the narrative of everything's to do with the scale and my compliance. Otherwise, there are no other metrics of progress, and that is the worst thing you can do. And I have 2 clients that came from that. And one of the clients that came from a coach like that, it took her 8 months to finally even start making forward progress with me because of the damage that did to her psyche. It took that long. Yeah, she was fatigued. She started losing all like motivation. Like, we had to do a lot of work to get her to the point now where she's actually looking forward to every single session. She's writing in her training log. We're gonna get the training log soon. She's writing in a training log that she's feeling stronger. She's actually not experiencing pain in her day-to-day life now. Her husband wants to get on board. Like, it took this long to undo all of the damage of the past, but this is where people would have given up 3 months into the process, not even. But she stayed forward. She kept persisting with me, and we made this breakthrough. And I don't see her stopping anytime soon. She's enjoying social life again. She's actually picking up on things that she needs to change for herself, because we can't make changes. We can only show you the light and be like, can you see this? Can you see this? And maybe you'll start to see it over a few weeks. Hey, I think I'm eating too much processed food, and this is why my bowels are shit. I'm like, yeah, I'm so happy you see it now. Like, I could have pointed that out to her, but she would have still been blind to it until she actually pointed it out for herself. So that is what we are. We are shining lights for that. And I want to go back to the scale now, but this is why I ban the scale for at least 6 to 12 months with my girls, because people do not know how they feel in their bodies. They do not know how to even tune into their bodies. They don't know their bodies anymore. And then this translates into the gym. You then end up not knowing how your muscles feel, how your body feels, how things should feel, because you start just chasing load. Hey, the hip thrust is my favorite thing to shit on, and everyone knows this. Let's just keep adding pounds to the hip thrust. And then you get to like 200 pounds, 100 kilos, whatever on the hip thrust. You're not even getting the full extension at the top. You're just like, hey, I can get plates on the bar, bro. You're missing out on most of the benefits of your lifting, because all you're doing is then chasing the load there. It's like, yeah, but then how does it feel? How are you going to keep the motivation there if everything is just predicated by the number on the bar, just like it was with the scale? And this is why it is so important for you to realize that your feels and any type of progress, the qualitative is the most important metric for progress, because we are human beings. We feel, we have emotions. That emotion drives us if we learn to tune into it the right way and then back it up with that quantitative. But when we are more on the qualitative, we start to understand that, hey, this is a process, and the quantitative isn't just a linear thing, and it isn't just one channel only, because that one channel can be linear, but then there comes a point where then you need to periodize again, and then it's not going to be so linear anymore. And then it's not just that one channel either. There are other things happening. Maybe this plateaued, but everything else is progressing. But if you're so hyper-focused on this, I'm not making any progress, I suck, I failed. Okay, how about all the other things? Take that one away.
Yeah, just like anything else, I think that we just need a better full analysis of these things, right? It's like, I'll get, we can pull that away from training, even or nutrition. I'll get asking a client like, hey, how's everything going here? And maybe they have some issues at work. And I ask them like, well, did you voice any of your concerns the way that you just did to me? Because that sounded pretty reasonable. Like, did you, and it's like, oh no, I didn't tell anyone. I didn't say, I just didn't say anything. It's like, well, kind of like you mentioned, well, how do you expect it to change then if nothing changes, right? And I think what ends up happening, Ruby, is I think we have this idea that once we have the safety and security we need, we'll become braver to then tackle the hurdles that we need to tackle. But that's not how human bravery and sort of pride and accomplishment is derived. You get braver by walking into the unknown despite the fact that you're scared, and then fighting your way through it. you know, we've seen this in many mythological stories. The king who already grew up inside of a castle with a drawbridge is never the greatest warrior, right? And that's an old mythological story because you're protected, you know, versus the other person was like out there on the battlefield from a very young age. And you can kind of take that with the fitness and nutrition, that like you're not just going to stumble. I think social media makes it really easy to subconsciously feel like we'll eventually stumble across the right answer, right? So like, oh, and that's where people get very like squirrel minded, right? So they see some fasting thing, or they see some keto thing, or carb cycling, or I could name 300 things right now. They're all the same stuff. They're just tools. And they feel like, oh, that's the tool I've been missing. It has to be some hyper complex shit, because we don't like having to get real with ourselves and saying like, well, Dylan, do you really think that you have been doing, out of 10, how good have you been doing on your responsibilities over here? 7. What about over here? 6. What about over here? 7. All of a sudden you start adding up and you're like, well, I'm getting a D minus. And the kind of the prize that I'm winning is pretty much D minus. Rather, we would come up with some, and then we have to change our worldview. And that's really painful. So that's why people don't want to look into those things, because you have to admit that the way you're seeing the world is maybe needs adjusting. And that's not always super clear on how to do that. So then people push that idea away and they'll reach to complexity. Like, it must be my thyroid. It must be this, must be this. And I do functional health cases, and sometimes it is, but it's 1 out of 10 people, or 1 out of 25 people, or 20. It's not every person. Most people need very low hanging fruit to improve their health. Put it to you that way.
If you look in girls groups, it actually it's quite funny but sad at the same time. People will put up statuses, people will put up questions, whatever the hell, and there'll be a comment on it saying, yeah, but then you need to look at hormones. What about your hormones? What about this hormones? Everything is hormones lately. And it's the easiest thing for people to cling to because it means not doing the work.
Well, no one understands it. It's just some complex witchcraft, right? Because it's like, if you're talking to someone who's a pretty low level of knowledge, and so are you, and they ask you like, oh, you're on a fitness journey, like, how's that been going? And you're like, have you lost any weight, or have you seen any progress? The person's like, oh, no, but my hormones are pretty screwed up. Well, the person is automatically, it's kind of like body positivity. It just closes the conversation down, because now you don't have any pushback against the real world. Because the thing is that person you told that to just doesn't want to question you because they don't know anything about it, but they probably have questions. That's different. You know what I mean? Those are not the same thing, right? So when you put yourself in a position to just tell yourself that there's some mythical reason as to why you're not getting what you want, you'll never be able to see a clear map to actually getting it. So it ends up being a self-fulfilling prophecy, and you won't get it, and you'll repeat the same negative habits over and over, unfortunately.
It becomes really easy to just settle for where you are and make the justifications, but the thing is, you're still not comfortable with it, which is That's the funny part, because it's like you're not comfortable, but you feel better in being not comfortable, but then at the same time you don't, because you want to change. You don't like where you are. But the fact that it's your hormones, it's just like, why bother? Why try? And I had someone reach out to me ages ago, and she's probably still stuck in her same story. She tells herself, oh, I've hit this age. This is what's meant for me now. It's menopause. Nothing's working for me anymore. I only just stopped tracking my macros recently. So it's not that, because I was tracking them before. Like, things don't just happen around food. It's not just food. Like, people do not understand that you can smash yourself in the gym. You can eat the proper food. But if you sit on your ass outside of that, that does, like, like my usual, here's an example. My usual calories, as an example, would be 2,600, 2,700, because I usually am very active and I train hard. As soon as I got my ass seated down after surgery, my maintenance calories would have been around 16, 1,700. But because I'm in recovery and because I still have bleeding going on, there is the extra calories that I then need to recover. So there are calories there.
Got you.
So that brings me up to 1800. But the thing is, that is still a massive 900 calorie gap from me sitting on my ass. Like, it is not training that has boosted my calories up to 2700.
No.
That is, I can't, like, my steps at the moment are 3,000, 4,000. That is what it is. So if you compare 3,000, 4,000 steps, which is the majority of people listening to this, because I'm telling you, it is that easy. Because I've been walking around my house a lot. I live upstairs. I go up and down the stairs regardless of the fact that I need to sit on my butt. Like, I do move around my house a lot. People are sitting at their desks all day. That is 3,000 to 5,000 steps is what most of you get. I usually get 16,000 as my average.
It makes a big difference.
If you're not taking into consideration everything else that's happening in your life outside of nutrition, outside of how many reps and sets you lift, then you're shortcutting yourself.
That's correct. Yep. 100%.
I'm going to get you now to talk about the training in itself, because I think it's a really important part, and we can relate this to lifestyle in itself. But fueling for training performance is one thing, but then there's also training intensity is a skill. It's something you need to learn. Like, it's really freaking hard for you to even, I hate when people say, like, this training to failure debate is completely stupid for the majority of people, because most people don't even know what failure feels like. They're training 10 reps away from failure, and they're trying to, and then people say, don't train to failure. So then they're staying 10, 12 reps away from failure, because they think that they're 8 reps away from failure is failure, but it's not. So there's fueling for training performance. There's training intensity as a skill, but also learning to engage the certain muscles, learning tension. All of that is a skill as well.
Yeah. So I think this is I kind of agree that the whole debate is kind of stupid, because we're turning a debate that should be individualized and we're making it general, right? So whose failure? What failure? How long have they been training? How strong are they? There's just so many questions that come into that, and expanding the time horizon. So for myself, if you had asked me 5 years ago if I trained hard, I would have said, hell yeah, I did. And now I could bury my 5 years ago self in a session, no problem, because I learned through those painful sessions with sometimes people that were more skilled or bigger than me or stronger than me, over and over again, of getting kind of buried in a metaphorical sense, and then learning to kind of come back with a stronger mindset. So I agree that training till failure as just like we're so dogmatic. We want to wear everything like a fucking badge, like we're on a team, like I train till failure, I'm in this camp, when in reality, all these things are just tools, and yeah, you can make some results on keeping some reps in reserve. You can train to failure. I'll be honest, I stopped overcomplicating a lot of that. I started to decomplex my approach a couple of years ago. I try and find out what the person actually likes doing, and they'll progress. So I have some people doing RIR work. I have some people doing a lot more failure work. I have some people doing a combination of both. And that's what I do. I do like sort of an ascending intensity. So I actually like a little bit more volume. I don't like just a couple sets. I don't like that low of volume. So, but I'll start off kind of like 4 RIR, 3 RIR, 1 or 2, and then 0. So I'm kind of reaching a top set. I don't start at a top set and back down. And I think that you get more tension and stimulus that way. That's why I do it. But at the same time, irrelevant. I've had great results on other systems, and I just do what I enjoy. And, learn, like you said, right? Your strength is going to be so linear and inverse, because as you get better at something, you'll need less load. But then when you get better at it, you'll target that muscle better, and over time it'll get stronger, so you'll need more again. So it's likely that if you're just starting out, your strength's probably going to go up, dip down, and then start to move back up. And it might go in waves like that for years. That's what happened to me. Like, I'm back to pressing dumbbells I pressed 6 years ago. But yesterday when I was doing it, I could literally see my pecs filling up on every single rep. And it was like, yeah, last time I was using these fucking dumbbells 5 years ago, that didn't look like this. it didn't feel like that either. Certainly my pecs weren't blown up after this set. It just felt like I worked hard. That's not the same thing, right? So, you know, the load in your hand is just a relative tool to create the stimulus. So I think that's a better way to like think about it, right? You know,
huge.
then like it's because people think more is better, and like mechanical tension does matter. So if you're using some 10% 1 rep max, like no, that's not enough to create an actual stimulus. But you know, there's a whole bunch of different rep ranges you can train in to build muscle. There's a whole bunch of, you know, different tempos and different training styles. You just have to be willing to progress. And that takes responsibility because you can't jump all over and do a bunch of different shit every day. And, you know, you have to actually apply yourself and track things and become an adult. You know, I always find that really interesting when, again, this shows area of lack, right? Like whenever someone comes on to the roster or I'm having a consult call with them and they're very hesitant to like take responsibility. It's like, oh, I don't really like tracking my workouts, or I don't like tracking my food, and I don't like eating a meal plan. And then at the end of the day, I'm like, so what did you think you were going to do? Like what tools was it in your mind that I was going to give you that you were going to come here and have a bunch of results on not doing anything different besides what you want? And again, I think that has nothing to do with the food or the diet or the training. I think that just goes to show that there's a lack of inner child being stimulated in the personal life, because there's already such a lack of that sort of fun and passion, which creates the meaning and purpose you spoke about earlier. Because meaning and purpose is like the ship that carries you through the storm, which there will be a storm, multiple. Life is the same for everybody, right? I don't mean the same life. I mean same recurring struggles, and that comes in different waves for everyone. But I think that what happens to people is they get set on motivation being the carrier, and it's not, because motivation is fleeting and it's going to run out. And maybe it's 2 years. You know, like people can get motivated for very long periods of time, so they don't even recognize this. I was one of those people because I lost so much weight and I had so much weight to lose. Essentially, as a byproduct for me to succeed, I had to be motivated for 2 years because I needed to lose weight for 2 years. Like not taking breaks, like continue to lose weight for 2 years. So I was motivated because I was getting kind of like you said, I was getting addicted to the results, right? Instead of the path. And there's a good saying that, you know, the man who loves walking will walk further than the man who is just concerned about the destination. And I think that's very fitting here.
Motivation was there on a fad or a challenge or while results were coming fast. And a lot of times, people do dumb approaches. But then what? That's the question. Then what? And that's when people relapse, because they were addicted to the results, that they lost the path. They went off the path. And now you need to try to find that path again. But you've already lost complete faith in the fact that you can do it, because now you're interwebbed in that rebellion that we were talking about, the stories that you tell yourself, because maybe you've done that once, twice, 3 times before, because the last time you got on the path, you lost it again because you never had someone to actually guide you. And now you're scared to actually ask them. Like, why would you want someone to guide you when you have freaking Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and YouTube, and you have all these different things telling you what you have? What's the whole point in getting a coach? I don't want to compete. I don't have anything serious. Like, that's the mindset a lot of people have now, because there are so many people asking for what's the best program for this. Someone give me a leg day. Someone give me this. Someone give me that. What's the best I can do to lose fat, build muscle, lose fat, build muscle. Everyone wants to do everything at the same time, but they struggle to actually feel content, feel happy, feel satisfied, feel like they're ever there, because of the same approaches they keep taking. It's like you can get the results, you can physically get the results, but never be there mentally and physically, because the mental never caught up. The mental even never started the journey. It's all been about the physical. And what are you doing this for? Because we can both tell you that we've got into the best condition of our lives at a certain point. I was in way better condition once, but I never actually sat with that. I never believed it. I never felt like I was there. you never feel like you're there. I was the most hardest on myself when I was at my leanest even. And I never felt lean enough. And it's quite funny that I felt like when I was coming out of comp prep, I was getting fat fast. And I was freaking striated as hell. Like, you can have the leanest body, the best body, and not see it, because what you see isn't a reflection of what actually is. It's a reflection of where you are mentally and physically and everything, emotionally, socially, the Maslow hierarchy of needs. That all has to be checked off. That all has to be considered for you to actually be one with the process. You can't approach a process expecting results with the set if you're still looking in the same direction for markers of progress. Like, if your markers of progress is, I just want to be able to look how I feel. Well, if the way that you're trying to see yourself look, or the outcome that you're wanting physically, is still the same as where you started in the first place, you will never look the same way as you feel, because you're focusing more on the look than the feel. And I know you talk about self-talk a lot, and I want to go back to using the logbook, then more than just X times X reps. So bring in that part, because that's
and I did that for a while, and it can feel pretty good when you're seeing it go in the right direction, but it can feel pretty bad when it's not going in the right direction, just like anything else. And all I started to make simple changes was kind of like, so in my logbook, I still do track my sets and reps, but I'm not tracking it. Well, I don't track it with the necessarily the mind, and maybe some of the hardcore bodybuilders will disagree with me here, but I think we've done a bad job of turning bodybuilding, which is just the realm I'm speaking of because I'm kind of in that realm, even physique development training, which is not just necessarily bodybuilders, it's most lifestyle athletes train physique development style training because that's what one of their goals is. And we get stronger as a byproduct, and it's great for mobility and all that type of stuff. But I think we've done a bad job of turning that type of training into powerlifting, right? Where it's like, if you got to be adding load to the bar every session, and that's these guys running 4 fucking grams of gear a week. And it's like, most people's body are not going to add load like that every single week. It's just not going to happen. And maybe you could make an argument it's because they're not pushing themselves, but it doesn't matter why. It's just probably not going to happen. When you've trained enough people on the gym floor to know this, like I have, it's like, I'll make a logbook. Let's say I take a weight and I complete the reps target, but it didn't quite feel how I wanted it to feel. I'm like, oh, that was a little wobbly. Like, I moved it and it was good, but it needs to be better. I'll write in my logbook here, 100 pounds by 8 reps. And then I'll write beside that, we need 2 to 5 more sessions here with that load before we even consider a load bump. Because I want to get better at that first. And then I track things like, how was my sleep the night before? I'll tell you what, as someone who struggles with sleeping due to a busy life, if you want to instantly have more positive emotion, start tracking your water and your sleep in your logbook, just as a little note. Because then what you'll notice, let's say you go the whole week, and this would happen to me. If I was just tracking sets and reps, it'd be like Monday, Tuesday session, not what I wanted. Wednesday, day off. Thursday, Friday, not the sessions I want. Now I'm like pissed off because the whole week is fucking ruined because I didn't get stronger, like subjectively. And even if that is the case now, if I didn't make any progress at all on any lifts, I'd still be kind of annoyed. I can admit that. But if I was to look back at my logbook, it's like, oh, well, you slept 4 hours Monday and Tuesday. Probably didn't really expect, like, I don't think we should be expecting to see a bunch of PRs on Thursday. So that's a simple thing. Or like, oh man, I only had 2 liters of friggin' water on Thursday. My performance on Friday wasn't that good. Well, I kind of deserve to have my performance not that good when I only had 2 liters of water. So there's a bunch of different examples, and just, I don't even want to call it tracking these metrics because I'm not writing them to track them. Like, I'm not doing anything with them necessarily. I'm using it as like a mental guide to take a full analysis. Because as we're going back to that, I think we're doing a bad job of taking partial analyses of things.
Yeah, and I think also just writing it down kind of allows you to process it more, which a lot of people don't. Like, writing things down makes you process it.
It does, because you're like, oh yeah, I did actually sleep like shit. And you know, and then you think like, yeah, I was kind of a little bit more grouchy at work, and then I kind of forced myself to come to the gym, and that's great. That is great because you're going to need that. It's not just when you feel like it, right? How you feel is not always how you should act, but you can kind of live with, let's say, knowing that like next week's going to be a different week. I'm going to get my sleep in order. I'll get my water in, and it kind of takes you on a challenge route. That if you're upset at something, obviously you care, and if you care and you believe that you care, belief is set in action. So you'll take the actions required to make that better. And that just becomes a more peaceful process than just looking at some numbers and, again, like the scale, judging your value based on objective numbers that no one gives a fuck about, really.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I say write more things in your logbooks, because of all those reasons that you just said. Like, it actually allows you to process and it makes you realize things. Like, it shifts your focus from being so numbers orientated, so scales orientated, so body focused, to actually learning how the fuck you feel. Like, no one knows. And that, like, I always track what, like, weight and what reps and stuff that I use. Yeah, but that's like the smallest part of it. And especially if I use cables or machines, I know that those things are going to change if I have to use a different cable set because someone just took my cable set, or I have to use a different machine for something because someone else just took my other machine, because there's such thing as levers. Like, it's not an absolute amount that you're lifting that's always going to be the same on every other cable, because there's a lever of where the plate is, where the cable is, where you are, the whole setup, the actual system itself. Like, things change. And if you're putting all of your meaning on the weights instead of how things feel, like, I train, like, I always do a warm-up set of something, and I gauge things based off what is my intensity for this. Am I getting close to failure? Can I even get close to my rep range? No. So maybe I might need to actually drop the weight. Maybe I might need to increase the weight. I get the weight that I can gauge as this is perfect for my working sets. And then I do that. And if I feel like I can increase it on the next set, oh, by the way, guys, you can actually increase your weight over the sets. You don't have to do the same weight for all the sets. So you'll actually be able to be like, hey, let's do that. And then you can still train to the same RPE, your same effort level with a different weight, but it's the same effort level. So it's pretty much the same stimulus to the muscle, and more things impact sessions than just your muscle progress, your strength progress.